Okay, everybody, our lesson for today is war spreads. Our objectives and standards to describe how the war expanded to other places around the world and to analyze support and strategies by the United States. And take a moment there to read the standards. Our desired result, how did the war spread around the world? Okay, battling Britain. After the fall of France, Great Britain stood alone against German forces. Now, the United States really doesn't want to get involved in the war yet, so Great Britain is kind of the only one that stands against Germany at this point, and Italy for that matter. The Prime Minister of Great Britain, Winston Churchill, he vows to defend the country. Like I said, Hitler is going to turn his goals towards defeating the British. He decided he needed to knock out the Royal Air Force, or the RAF, first. And this is, a big deal to him. And then, once he was able to take out the British Air Force, he would be able to land troops on the shores of the country. So, airplane fight. In the summer of 1940, Germany's Air Force, the Luftwaffe, began bombing Great Britain. Okay, now first, Germany focused on military sites like airfields and factories that made airplanes. But then, in September, I'm sorry, on September 7th, 1940, the cities in Great Britain began to be bombed, especially London. And the goal of this was to break the spirits of the British people. Obviously, when you're having your cities and your homes bombed, the goal was to hopefully break, just the morale and spirit of the British. Now, despite these attempts, and despite a large loss of life and property and things like that, they remained strong. The British remained hanging in there. So this is a painting or a depiction of the Battle of Britain. You can see here, I'll try to highlight this here for you. These are the British planes, the yellow planes there, and then we have the German or Nazi planes here. But again, a lot of the Battle of Britain took place in the skies and over Britain. So this was a very big, important battle that happened during World War II. So the Royal Air Force was outnumbered, but they fought back hard. Two of the things that helped the British fight back were radar. The new invention of radar that had recently come out allowed them to detect airplanes and things like that when these bombing missions by the Germans were going to happen. And the Enigma, a machine that broke the German secret code, allowed them to be successful. So when they captured this machine, it allowed them to, know the German plans basically. So those two things definitely helped the British be able to kind of survive during these attacks. When Germany learns of radar, they begin doing these nighttime bombings in hopes that they won't be able to be detected successfully. So they began bombing night bombings in October 1940. So while British citizens fled to air raid shelters for cover, or some stuck it out in their homes, but a lot of people are going to go to these air raid shelters and subway tunnels or wherever else. The Battle of Great Britain is going to rage over the sky, so people can literally walk outside their house and see airplanes fighting above their head. Now, the Battle of Britain will come to a conclusion on May 10th, 1941, when Hitler decides that he's going to call off the attacks. He decides they're not getting anywhere, this is just, a waste of resources and men. So he decides that, he's going to call off the attacks on Great Britain. So the fight for North Africa. So Hitler became frustrated with the fight against the British, so he turned to other goals. Germany's first objective in the Mediterranean region was North Africa. Mussolini had invaded Egypt in September 1940 with goals of capturing the Suez Canal. Now, the reason for this is he wanted access to the oil fields in the Middle East. Now, the Italians were able to push Great Britain's forces back in the beginning, but by December 1940, the British began fighting back themselves. So as the Italians are kind of suffering, and struggling against the British, Adolf Hitler is now, excuse me, he's now forced to help the Italians, which he really didn't want to get involved kind of right away. So, he kind of has to go help his buddy, basically. So he sends his German tank force to the region under a man by the name General Erwin Rommel. Okay, and this Africa Corps was very successful, and they forced the British into retreat. So thanks to Rommel and the Africa Corps with these tanks, the Germans are able to kind of push the British back a little bit. So Rommel becomes known as the Desert Fox because of his success. He's very sneaky. He's got a lot of military tactics. So that's his nickname, is the Desert Fox. All right, so the Balkans, or Balkans, I'm sorry, I should say. Hitler decided he was going to attack his ally, the Soviet Union, in early 1941. So to do this, the German leader named the Balkan countries in the region of southeastern Europe. So Hitler was able to persuade Romania, Bulgaria, and Hungary to join the Axis powers. He was able to invade Yugoslavia and Greece, which had refused to kind of be part of the Axis, I guess, and was able to capture them in a short period of time too. So again, Hitler has this kind of these countries that he controls now that he's able to launch an attack against the Soviet Union. So here we have a map of the Axis occupation of the Balkans in 1941. You can see a lot of the German areas or countries that they controlled or had support in. That's what they mean by puppet government, is they had like a support government there that was controlled kind of by Germany a little bit. But again, you can see that a lot of this area was pretty much controlled by the Axis powers. So invading the USSR. So after capturing the Balkans, Hitler moved ahead with his plan to invade the Soviet Union. The plan was called Operation Barbarossa, and it happened on June 22nd, 1941, was when Germany began its invasion. So the Germans pushed further into the country, and as they did this, the Soviets destroyed, as well as burned, items in the path of the enemy. So they destroy, property, livestock, everything. And you may remember that the Russians had done this before when Napoleon invaded Russia back in the 1800s. This is known as scorched earth policy. We talked about that a little bit. So the Soviets are going to use this again. So the city of Leningrad came under siege on September 8th, 1941. So completely cut off from the rest of the country, the city was bombed and attacked, while citizens were forced to eat everything, including rats and horses. So, these people in the city are surrounded and cut off from the rest of their country. They're running low on supplies, so they had to eat a lot of pretty nasty stuff. And nearly 1 million people are going to die in Leningrad during that winter of 1941 to 1942. But again, the city still held strong, and the Germans, were unable to take it right away. So again, Hitler grows frustrated and impatient. Again, he wants to keep moving. He doesn't want to wait. So he set his sights on Moscow, which was the heart and capital of the country. So German forces reached the outskirts of the city by December, and Hitler ordered no retreat. He tells them, do not retreat. And so the troops dug in, the German forces dug in, I should say. And they stayed there until about March 1943. In the long run, the advance in the Soviet Union gained Hitler nothing. He didn't gain any territory, he really didn't gain much from the invasion of the Soviet Union. The only thing he gained was, unfortunately, I shouldn't say unfortunately, but you know what I mean, it was a loss of lives. It was 500,000 lives were lost because of this invasion and this attempt to take over the Soviet Union. All right, let's talk about the U.S. So like we just said, most Americans believe that the nation should stay out of the war. Between 1935 and 1937, the U.S. Congress had passed neutrality acts. We talked about that a little bit too previously, how it was illegal to sell weapons or anything like that to countries at war or give them loans. So we did talk about that a little bit. But President Roosevelt knew that the country could be drawn into a war if the other allies fell. So he took steps to help support the Allies in their fight. In September 1939, Roosevelt asked Congress to allow the Allies to buy arms made in America. So he says, countries can buy arms from America. The Allies would pay cash for these items and then carry the supplies on their own ships back to their country. So again, the United States is not really, we're kind of playing a mediator, but we're not really becoming involved in the war at this point. In March 1941, the Lend-Lease Act allowed the lending or leasing of arms and supplies to any country that was vital to the United States, so places like Great Britain, obviously a big one, but lending and leasing these arms and supplies so that way we could protect our interest around the world as well. So although the U.S. had not officially entered the war yet, Roosevelt and Churchill met in secret. And they issued a resolution that was known as the Atlantic Charter, and we talked about it in the vocab preview. This was a resolution saying that the countries of the world are open to free trade, and that countries have a right to pick their own government. On September 4th, 1941, a German U-boat fired on the United States destroyer. And after this, President Roosevelt orders Navy commanders to shoot any German submarines on sight. So this is now kind of like an unofficial war between the U.S. and Germany. So even though we didn't officially declare war on Germany, Roosevelt tells people, hey, if you see a German submarine, you don't wait, just open fire. But this will not be the main event that will bring the United States into the war. That will come from another country, and some of you may know about Pearl Harbor, so we'll talk about that in our next lesson. But the event that draws the U.S. into the war officially will be from Japan. Okay, so our closure. How did the war spread around the world? So do your best on the questions that follow. And this will help you answer the question there, and have a great rest of your day or night.